the public lighting retrofit. And so welcome one and all to this evening's lecture, and I'd like to hand you over to our speaker, Brian Ahern.
Hi, thanks Rowan for the introduction, and to Orla. As I said, listen, I'm Brian Ahern. I work for the Road Management Office. The Road Management Office are based out of Donegal. It's a shared service between all the local authorities. And I suppose it's, listen, I might talk about to do a road management and road licensing and stuff like that. So listen, I'll talk about that later on. I'm on this project now nearly 4 years, I would imagine. And we just went out to tender about there at the start of October. And tender returns are back for the first one in a week or two's time. So what I'm going to do is just kind of give a broad overview of the project. I know this is the electrical and electronic division, but I'm a civil engineer, so I won't be getting into too much conversation about electrical and ohms and all this kind of stuff. So it's just going to be a general kind of talk how we got the project off the ground, and I think that's interesting enough for people like a project of this size and scale and what's involved kind of getting local authorities and government bodies and how projects like this kind of get off the ground and doing business cases and stuff like that. And listen, I'm going to touch on a few bits of specifications of the project to do with the ESB networks and stuff like that. So there will be some stuff on that as well. What is the project? I suppose at the moment it's a collaboration of 21 local authorities. We're grouped together in 3 contracts to retrofit their remaining lights that are not LEDs to high efficiency LED lights. The total estimated capex of the project, we're looking at about 150 million. But we'll know more about that now in a week's time when we got tender returns back and what kind of prices we are. But we're looking at about 150 million. Once completed, it will save local authorities about 200 million in energy and maintenance over the project horizon, which is 20 years. So the business case was done over 20 years. We're looking at the lifespan of it. LED lights is about 100,000 hours, which is a 20-year lifespan. So that was the business case done over 20 years. So that 200 million is after even loan repayments. So by the time the less maintenance, you won't be changing bulbs. The energy costs obviously are down. And we're looking at saving around 25,000 tons of CO2 per year once this project is finished. The final energy we're looking at saving is about 72,000 megawatt hours a year. We're looking for a minimum 55% energy efficiency. That's in the project specification. So in reality, we could be getting 60, maybe 70% in some lights as well too. So listen, minimum 55. I think that's easily achieved, but we should expect a lot higher for that. Why are we doing the project? Number one reason, I suppose, is climate change. There's a lot of targets and statutory targets that the local authorities and all the public sector, even nationally, that we're supposed to achieve. And I'll go through them in a minute. And the second thing is to save money. Public lighting for local authorities is about 50% of the energy bill at the moment. After Irish Water left, it was about 25% Irish Water left now, so it's about 50%. So listen, if we can save 50% on an energy bill, then all the better. And also we need to survey the condition of the public lighting asset. I'll go into that later on as well too, about the history of public lighting. Local authorities didn't always manage public lighting. It was only about maybe 2008, 2009 that we kind of took over the managing of it. So there's an awful lot of lights out there we don't know the condition of. So we need to find that out as well too. And we do plan for the future of management of public lighting. So we need to get the condition ratings, and then we can put asset management plans into place and kind of do a kind of proactive management of the asset into the future. Public lighting in Ireland. This is a map of Ireland at night. Now this is our pre-LED retrofit, so basically around 2008, 2009, before any LEDs were started being retrofitted. There's about 490,000 public lights in Ireland, nearly 500,000. The total installed capacity is about 58,000 to nearly 59,000 kilowatt hours installed capacity, consuming about 244 gigawatt hours a year in electricity. That's final energy as well too. Nationally, I suppose once completed, local authorities will be saving about 144 gigawatt hours. Listen, it's probably again more than that. I only literally put 50% on that. You know, a lot of the earlier LEDs probably wouldn't have that much more efficient, but that's the order of magnitude we're talking about. So as you can see, it's a significant amount of energy that in public lighting, and it's an easy win. I suppose, as I say, one of the leading reasons for doing this is the National Energy Efficiency Action Plan. You all might know the 2020 targets. Public bodies had a 33% energy efficiency reduction by 2020. I know we're 2020 now, but we suppose we started the project a couple of years ago, and I suppose with public lighting being 50% of the local authorities' energy consumption, if nothing was done on this, then they wouldn't have reached their 2020 targets. But I suppose now, we got the project up and running. I suppose the latest target now is a 2030 targets, where we have to, local authorities in the public sector have to achieve a 50% reduction in consumption. And I suppose we're roughly about 20%, actually probably a bit higher than that. The latest figures are out now. There's been a lot more renewables kind of come on stream. I need to probably revise those figures. But I think the local authorities probably high 20s and even 30% at the moment. But the 2030 targets are a lot more onerous, as I say, to be 50% more efficient, okay, by 2030. So I suppose there's a kind of graph here I've done with the local authorities who are involved in the project. Now this is probably a year or two old. These are probably 2018 figures. I haven't updated them yet. That's the target efficiency that local authorities have to meet, target efficiency. With this project, we get all the local authorities over the line for the 2020 targets, and a good way to their 2030 targets, as you can see there. Now the local authorities down the end there's probably just an accounting error, I'd say, to be honest, because most of the targets will be a lot better than that. But I suppose these the previous targets are energy efficient. You be more energy efficient. Okay, it doesn't mean you have a net reduction. It means you have to be more efficient. Local authorities could, or public bodies could, actually be using more electricity, but they're probably doing more work. Okay, but on the 2030 targets, there's an absolute reduction in carbon. So local authorities have to have a 30% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2030, and we've been kind of concentrating on the southern region. So this is the estimate where it should get the local authorities to these 2030 targets. And listen, it gets them there very early on. So they have another few years to meet that target, but they'll be well on the way to meeting the 2030 targets, carbon reduction targets. The savings from the project. As you can see here, again, these were kind of slides I've done for the southern region, because we kind of southern region, which is kind of Cork, Clare, Cork, Kerry, Limerick and Waterford. You can see the number of kilowatt hours they're saving. Cork, say 8.7 million kilowatt hours, roughly 3,800 tons of CO2, which is the equivalent to about 800 cars off the road, and 830 cars annual consumption of CO2 for cars off the road. So it's going to have a big impact, so it's a big project. Breakdown of the of light types, I suppose, the inventory. This is a kind of a survey, I suppose. Up until a couple of years ago, there wasn't any one unified public lighting authority database, and we started collecting it together. So we don't have all of them. With the Dublin authorities are kind of on a solo run, and to be honest, they've programs and plans in place for the last couple of years, so they're not involved in this project. They're cooperating with us. As you can see here, the purple lights here are SOx lights, so they're the low pressure sodium lights. So they're the real dark orange light you see, from years ago. The cyan colors kind of around the south here, they're sun lights. Okay, so I thought it was an interesting kind of pattern there. You can see there's a definite pattern to where you can see the SOx and sun lights around the country, where the southern half of the country was mostly suns, the Midlands and the West kind of mostly SOx lights. And I suppose another reason, actually, for now that I mentioned it, for this project is the SOx lights. They're stopped manufacturing SOx lights, I think is this year or last year, and it was around 50% of the lights in the country were going to be SOx lights. So if we didn't replace them, they're going to have to be replaced with sunlight. So that's another reason we had to do this project. As you can see, again, that's just broken out into the kind of the eastern the region, northwest region, the east region. As you can see, the southern region there, the vast bulk of the lights are sun lights, but the other two regions are kind of a mixture, more or less being SOx and suns, and the percentage of LEDs as well is there. So, yeah. distribution of the wattage of the wattage of the lights. As you can see, again, it's mostly under 100 watts the lights are. So a lot of the bulbs, the 55 watt sock or 55 watt son, would nearly be, 40-50%, and then you're kind of going up to maybe 70 watt or 90 watt sock or sunlight as well too. And after that, then the bigger lights, they taper off drastically. Like, so I think on average, it's about 120 watts billable wattage as well too. So there's definitely nominal wattage and billable wattage. The nominal wattage is the nominal wattage light, but ESB networks and the UMR charge the billable wattage to account for system losses and losses with the ballast and the driver. So a 55 watt sock light actually consumes about 85 watts of electricity. LEDs, their billable and nominal wattage are the same, so there's no system losses there. Right, the history of public lighting. I suppose up until 2009, it was actually ESB who managed and installed public lighting. Now, that's excluding maybe new housing estates and stuff like that, okay? Not everywhere, but the vast bulk of it, they put up lights on their own ESB poles, and housing estates up from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I suppose there was background then, there was a deregulation of ESB, deregulation of the energy sector. So they wanted to get rid of a number of their businesses. So it was the CER, the Commission of Energy Regulation, now the CRU, said, right, listen, local authorities, you have public lighting now. So there was a CRU decision, CRU decision 2009 that, listen, here you go. And it was after that the local authorities were left holding the baby as such. Public lighting was transferred to local authorities as part of deregulation. But I suppose up until then, I suppose it was just to kind of keep the lights on, maintenance. If the light went out, they replaced the bulb. So there was no real kind of active management. Local authorities, even though they actually paid ESB networks for the lights, it was ESB networks who ran them and managed them, but we paid them directly. But after 2009, there was competition. There was a one or two kind of guys from ESB networks set up their own companies, public lighting management companies, and there was competition into the market. And actually, the maintenance costs after about 2 or 3 years halved. There was I think in Cork alone they nearly saved $500,000 a year, and just by after 2009, the maintenance costs when a bit of competition came into the market. And I suppose that since when that happened in 2009, I suppose, as I was saying, the local authorities were kind of left holding the baby, I suppose, and managing it managing it on a day-to-day basis and getting maintenance contractors and stuff like that. It was decided, and they realised that, listen, this is a what you may call it, a service that is costing us a lot of money to maintain and stuff like that. So there was a review done. The local authorities, probably through the local government management agency, the LGMA, put together, right, we need a report on how do we manage public lighting into the future. So this report was done in 2012 to review public lighting in Ireland. Listen, there was lots of recommendations on it, but I suppose the chief one for us was develop a business case for a significant lighting upgrade. But there was other stuff like we need a standardized asset management system and a database even to know how many lights we have and what wattage they are and where they are. Because as I said, it was kind of pretty haphazard, the management of it up until then. So out of that report, there was a kind of a public lighting advisory group set up, okay? So as I was going on talk about later, when you're involved in the public sector, local authorities, there's lots of groups and advisory groups and committees and stuff like that, so you need to know who's who. So this public lighting advisory group was set up around then, I'd say around 2012, no, probably a bit later. It was chaired by Michael Walsh, Chief Executive of Water for City and County Council. They were the guys who commissioned the report initially. And he's still kind of leading the charge with this project. And it was representatives for local authorities, Transport Infrastructure Ireland, SEI, Department of Environment, the Department of Transport. It was a vast kind of stakeholders involved in public lighting. But listen, it was a kind of a part-time, I wouldn't say it was a voluntary group, but listen, these guys were doing a part-time. Do you know what I mean? If there was any report or any work to be done, they were only kind of maybe public lighting engineers was coming to this meeting every 2 months or something like that. So it was decided in this meeting that needs to be a dedicated resource to develop this project further. And I suppose that's where myself came into the scene. They said, right, we need to get bodies on this and work on this full time. So that's where myself, Derek Quill is the acting senior engineer, and there's a guy called Brian Burke as well too. And we're off in Cork County Council. There was we got seconded into the road management office. The Cork County Council were kind of one of the lead partners in the road management office, but it's based out of Donegal, so it was a kind of convenient vehicle that we could easily kind of be seconded into. And we were then put on this full time. All right, guys, listen, sort this out, set up, get a business case done, and get put the horsepower into it. So we were there since 2007. As I said, it's myself, Dara's leading the team there, and myself and Brian Burke are kind of supporting Dara as well too there. And I suppose then the kind of a number one kind of chief task force developed the business case to retrofit all the remaining non-LED lights to LED lights, develop a unified national public lighting database, coordinate nationally on behalf of local authorities regarding public lighting issues. So we kind of coordinate with ESB networks and a few other stakeholders nationally, kind of get kind of a joined up thinking on public lighting, develop standards and stuff like that. And I suppose to be a centre of excellence, now I'm putting that down there, that's to be decided yet. The jury's out on that one, a centre of excellence. But listen, I think we're doing quite well at the moment. Now, I suppose, as I said, the business case, okay, so this business case we started off into initially, and it was a big mad rush, let's get it done. I suppose the business case is basically how are we going to do this, do an economic cost benefit analysis, a financial appraisal, how is it going to be financed, all this kind of stuff. But listen, we were initial cost estimates, because we went in initially thinking, right, let's do it all for all 31 local authorities. That was our initial remit, because all the 31 local authorities were paying for us. And a project that size, we were looking just back at the envelope numbers, we were talking 200 million. So it was a serious undertaking. And luckily, I suppose the Department of Finance and their central expenditure evaluation unit have guidelines for the public spending and standardized methods of developing cost benefit analysis and business cases. So there's a thing you have to do there. So we got stuck into that. And it's complicated enough, And I suppose one of the early decisions we had to make, and there was kind of big discussions within the group, and we had a couple of people from the department, and we got help. We got help from the National Treasury Management Agency, and particularly New Era. New Era are a division of the NTMA that provide assistance to government departments. I think their primary function is to kind of review business cases that departments send in. So they go into the NTMA, this New Era section, review them, but they also will help departments or public sector if the project is big enough. They have financial consultants in there who would review business cases and do cost benefit analysis on a day-to-day basis. So that was one of the big helps there. We got help from them. Okay, but I suppose we were looking at a project that was 200 million, including 31 local authorities. These kind of big numbers kind of starts affecting the government balance sheet, and I suppose the government are kind of limited how much they can borrow every year by the EU Growth and Stability Pact. If I'm talking to the NTMA, I suppose they want, there's only, I think it's a 3% borrowing every year, the Growth and Stability Pact. So listen, 200 million might kind of push other projects out of that they could do, right? So I suppose and was there any way we could move that 200 million off the government balance sheet? And I suppose one way of doing it was to do an energy performance contract, or an ESCO, where the money is raised privately. You give it over to this energy performance contract, where a company manages your public lighting for 20 years, but they invest in it. You pay them a set fee every year, and they make the energy efficiency savings. They pay the electricity bill, so you pay up. So any savings they make in energy, and they want to make the most savings as possible, because the more savings they make, the more money they make. Then that was one option. But I suppose Eurostat gave guidance in 2018 that energy efficiency projects could be financed through EPCs. When we were initially doing it, Eurostat hadn't given that advice, and a lot of European countries were doing it, putting them off balance sheet. But we talked to the CSO, and they said, listen, yeah, we could, but we would have to go down down, literally draw up the contract documents and the tender documents, because they said, listen, we're going to have, because they got caught out once or twice when they thought they could put stuff off balance sheet, and they weren't be able to, so they would have to see the nitty gritty of it. So I suppose, but in the end of the day, setting up these ESCOs and energy performance contracts are very complicated, because you have a lot of measurement and verification, and you're giving over your asset for them to manage for 20 years and stuff like that. But I suppose the biggest reason we didn't go down the EPC route was the lending rates were between 4 and 5%, compared to what the government were giving the project about 1.2, 1.5% from government bonds and stuff like that. The project is looking to be financed through the Housing Finance Agency, which kind of supplies funding to local authorities for housing, but it's a bigger remit than that. It encompasses other issues around housing and obviously public lighting and stuff like that. So they raise bonds, and they give it to local authorities. So I suppose the difference between 1.2%, 4 and 5% is a big amount, especially over 20 years. And listen, after discussions with the government, I suppose, and the NTMA, the department said, listen, if you can make it fit, then you can make it fit within your annual budget. So we decided, we'll fund it ourselves. So summary of the project. I suppose we started off with 31 local authorities, and I suppose a lot of local Dublin authorities would have their own plans in place. Dublin City and Fingal are very, very proactive on that. Laois and Wexford, Monaghan as well too. These are all involved in it, but I suppose Monaghan are nearly done. I haven't looked like they're Northern Ireland there, but hopefully there's no one here from Monaghan, but that was just kind of shaded out the colour. But they're Monaghan will be nearly 100% retrofit in the next year or two. So I think they were very active in the project, but for the sake of it, by the time we give it to them, they're nearly be done. But so we're doing 21 local authorities split into 3 regions. There's a southern region, eastern region, and the northwest region. So we have about 270,000 lights, and we've an installed capacity that we're retrofitting about 31,500 kilowatts installed capacity. There's about 80,000 lights in the southern region, about 100,000 in the east region, about 70,000 in the northwest region. I suppose, going into the cost benefit analysis, I suppose when you go into the business case, you then have to do an economic CBA. So the economic CBA is different to a financial appraisal. The economic is how is it a benefit to the economy? And as I was going on earlier on, there's certain rules you have to follow for an economic CBA. It's no VAT, and this is where the help from the NTMA and Newer helped us an awful lot. They kept us going the right direction, and to be honest, they were invaluable. You have to include for shadow costs for public funds, so you have to add a factor of safety onto this 130%. So there's an awful lot of things. It's based against the counterfactual. So listen, in my other previous life as a kind of doing energy efficiency projects for a local authority and doing NPVs and net present values and doing rates of return on small projects. This was the kind of next level up. And then your business model and your financial model is then sent to the Department of Finance, Public Expenditure Reform, where they review it, technically review it. So it needs to be pretty bang on what you're doing. And to be honest, when we went deeper, they were very supportive of the project. And they said in their comments back, there was 1 or 2 issues we had, just minor technical issues, but they said that they would be strongly supportive of the project once it comes across their desk, when government puts it across their desk. This is the economic terms for the Southwest contract. We've done a national business case, which are a lot better, but a part of the public spending code, you have to kind of reevaluate your business case pre-tender, after tender. You have initial business case, and then before you go to tender, you need to relook at your assumptions and then put it into your business model again, and still make sure it stacks up. So you can see here down the bottom right hand corner here, you get a net present value of 15.4 million, a rate of return, internal rate of return 8.7, and a benefit calculation 1.4. So they're all very good, strong numbers. And again, as I said, there's still kind of a factor of safety in there, and all our assumptions, prudency was the number one issue. Because the project was kind of it wasn't a touch and go project whether it was economic to pay back or not. We were very prudent in our assumptions, so that, again, it gave us a room for comfort. So listen, this again is just a pre-tender kind of reevaluation on the economic return of the Southwest contract that I put in there, and it's still showing very strong returns for it. But I suppose the financial economic CBA doesn't mean much to local authorities when they're paying it back, and that's where the financial appraisal comes in. The financial is based on real costs to local authorities. What is it going to cost me every day and stuff like that? So it includes VAT, includes their debt funding and stuff like that, your loan repayment rates and all this kind of stuff. So as you can see there, for the southern region, we're getting a net decrease in expenditure after debt service costs of nearly 35 million. That's over the 20 years. But again, if you can see here, we have a 3.11% deeper rate. They do want a kind of, again, a kind of a factor of safety in their interest rates when you're doing financial appraisals. So we're hopefully borrowing from the HFA around 1.2 to 1.5%, depending on the loan term and stuff like that. So this and that increase in expenditure should go up maybe closer on to maybe 40 or 50 million. When you put in those rates and stuff like that. So as you can see, it pays back, and one of the aims of the project was that we wanted the project to not increase the local authorities' annual public lighting budget. So we wanted the term loans and stuff like that, so it was maybe over 15 years, that they wouldn't have to go to their local councillors and say, listen, we need an increase in our existing public lighting budget. It was net positive from day one, from year one, on the repayments on our business case. And then I suppose we have to go, you do your business case and you do all the thing, but then you have to get a peer reviewed and approval. So the business case was peer reviewed by an LGMA panel, which was chaired by Chief Executive of Kerry County Council, and they had a few public lighting experts on it, and a director of finance of a local authority, and a few senior engineers. And to be honest, it was a fairly extensive and fairly detailed peer review, and they did put us through the ringer. We went through it once, and then they had a lot of questions, so we had to come back again, if you know what I mean. But listen, I think, the more people look at it, your business case, and the more kind of accountability you have, the better. So what they do then is, after we went through the second thing, and they say, okay, yeah, we're happy with your proposal and your business case, they issue a recommendation for approval. And it's actually the Public Sector Reform and Oversight Group who gave formal approval for the project. They're a kind of a body that kind of sits over part of the LGMA, which kind of, I think, they were set up at the time of the financial crisis back in 2008, 2009. So they kind of review these business cases and these projects and stuff like that. So they give the final approval on that. And as I say, down here in the bottom, I suppose if you're a local authority and you're doing these projects and getting these big projects off the ground, you need to know your groups and your committees and the structures and what advisory group, because what we found, particularly with the LGMA, you have one group in charge of this, another group in charge of that, and 9 times out of 10, the group you're reporting to, they think the other group are only a bunch of lads and they have no power and stuff like that. So you really got to plot out who are the groups who have influence, who can make a recommendation, and stuff like that. So you need to plot that out very carefully. Tender and contract, and then I suppose going into parts of the business case, what type of contract are we going to use? I suppose there's the government approved contracts, but we said, because there's a kind of a project that, even though we did know the assets, we weren't fully sure of the asset, on how many lights we had, and it's changing every day. So we said we'd go down the NEC route, and we need NEC 4 option C. So we had to get the GCCC approval, so the Government Contracts Committee. So if you go outside the approved government forms of contract, you get approval of them. Again, another committee. So we went to them and got approval to use NEC 4 option C. So we had to go to them and say, listen, why we're going to use it. And I suppose it's a very kind of proactive, it's radically different to kind of the approved government contracts. I suppose the main philosophy of it, the parties, the project manager and the supervisor must act in a spirit of mutual trust and cooperation. Okay, so that's the main kind of thing at the NEC contracts. I don't know if anybody's ever used them. The three distinctive features of NEC, it's written in a kind of non-legal language and present tense throughout. It's easy contract to read. It's very direct. It's very straightforward. The emphasis on good products managed by the contractor and the project manager, and it can be used in a variety of commercial situations for different types of working locations. I suppose there's three different types. I'm going to kind of go through this easy enough. So there's three different levels of risk for the client to the contractor. So you have an activity schedule, lump sum, closed book, a bill of quantities, reasonable, semi-close, target contract, open book. So listen, the contractor costs are open book, and reverse the contract, open book, and management contract, partly closed. So we're going for NEC option C, which is an open book contract based on an activity schedule. So you can see the kind of the risk here, where the risk lies. The F is. So let me go back up there. Management partly closed. No, activity schedule. Yeah, the contractor A. That's the risk is with the contract with A, and the risk is the client with F, and we're sitting in the middle there. I suppose with the open book as well too, and the activity schedule, because we were pretty fluid with the number of lights we had. We needed that kind of open book, and I think it helps the contractor as well too. Also, I suppose with the activity schedule, an activity schedule is it's kind of like a BOQ, but it's kind of the contractor prices in a kind of a big lump sum, big units of work, and it fitted the municipal district, which is about 4,000 or 5,000 lights in there. So in the southern region there, the municipal districts in the southern region. So I think we have about 24 municipal districts. So it's price per municipal district. So the contractor come in, design a municipal district, and move on to the next municipal district. The contract, I suppose, this is a design and build project as well too. It will be completed by municipal districts, and that's the activity. Contractor will submit their design packs for the employer's representative, basically the client, for acceptance. So the client will have a time limit to accept the designs or deemed accepted. So the client has to accept designs to them in, and if he doesn't accept them, then they're deemed accepted. So there's no waiting for the contractor if he's sending in a design, and the client on our side is dragging his feet. He won't be held up for it. If he doesn't respond within 2 weeks or 3 weeks, then it's deemed accepted. So it's very admin heavy. That's the one thing about the NEC, but I think it works out good for everybody. Contractor, we also getting the contract to undertake a comprehensive condition survey of the asset, because one of the secondary goals was, since they're going visiting every light in the participation local authorities, we want them to kind of check that the inventory is okay, do a condition rating of it. Are the lights okay, or so because we had no real unified condition. We were only kind of, a lot of local authorities were only doing it proactively. If a light fell down or something or went off and stuff like that, there was no proactive management of it in some local authorities. So we need to gather the information, and then we can put together a plan to manage the public lighting asset into the future. And the construction program is, we're looking at about 30 months to 2.5 years. And we're also giving the contractors a bonus payments if they overachieve on energy efficiency. There's also a penalty as well too if they go over as well too. So it's not all it's all a bed of roses. Where we are with procurement, Southwest region is currently out for procurement, so we need tenders there the start of October. The tender returns are due back the 8th of December, which is next week kind of thing, maybe 10 days time. With work starting, hopefully contractor approval, work starting retrofitting lights kind of Q2, the middle of next year, 2021. The East region is out for tender for a consultant to get their package ready. I suppose the next two, East and the Northwest regions, should follow on very, very fast, because the contract documents are done. Basically, the specification is done. It's just a case of filling in the blanks, really, because we've done model forms. So anywhere it says Cork, you just put in Wicklow or something like that. So it should be very easy. We've an awful lot of the things ironed out at this stage. And the West and East region, we should be tendering for those, I'd say, towards the middle Q2, Q3 next year. I'll go into a few bit of the project specifications, and I suppose the electrical issues. I suppose this is the big thing, is the interfacing of the public lights with the ESB network. And I suppose you have the overhead network and the underground network. Now, most local authorities weren't working on ESB assets. They have to work to the ESB requirements for public lighting. There's a new updated document that was only released there last October as well too, and we've been working with ESB networks, I suppose, in reviewing that with ESB networks. So yeah, and all local anybody who's working on ESB assets as well too, the overhead network needs to have ESB training. But I suppose this is where we're doing with the interfacing. And if a public lighting scheme is interfaced, then you don't, you know what I mean, an electrician can work on it. um, Overhead network. I suppose the overhead network is relatively simple enough. You can see here a guy changing a light here. There's set rules, I suppose, as I say. You can, safety, I suppose the big issues are working with live lines. So they go up and they change out the light. They can see shrouding the live lines there, live wires, that we're going to put on an interface box. I was saying ESB networks, because they put them on their ESB poles, or managed up in 2009, they didn't have an interface or an isolator on their lights. Okay, so we are now putting, and they started doing it around 2009, 2010, but they didn't really finish the job, or they only kind of started. You can see that box on there, that's called an interface box, or sometimes called the Killarney box, because Killarney plastics make it. So what it is, with that'll be the interface. There's an isolator in there, and if a local authority engineer can come up and isolate the light and work on it without having to work on the live lines and stuff like that. And I suppose, yeah, there's a switch wire in the end. So once they put up the new light, we put on the interface box. Look, ESP networks are supposed to come along later on and reconnect the lights to the phases. At the moment, there's a switch wire in the end, and that's kind of a switch for switching the lights on and off. So they're reconnecting it then to the main phases. I suppose this works differently. LEDs work differently. They're individually controlled, where each of them have a light sensor on the top. Previous to that, I suppose the Sox and Sons, what you would find is one light in the end of the street might have the light sensor to switch on or switch off, based on how light or dark it was, and the switch wire then switched on the rest of the lights. But since LEDs are controlled individually, there's no need for a switch wire now anymore. And then there's also with the scan poles, which are poles that that ESB have an issue with. There's a safety issue, and they're kind of rotting on the inside and stuff like that. But listen, the overhead network isn't too. It's there, okay, and everybody can see it. And obviously, you're working with live lines and stuff like that, and there's issues there. But it's not too much of an issue, okay. Where we have the problem is the underground connection. And as I was saying, ESB networks and ESB bar, probably back in the day, did a lot of the installing of public lights, okay? And back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they put in 2-core concentric cabling, okay, that didn't have any earth, okay? And a lot of these housing estates, the older housing estates, are directly connected to the ESB mini pillar, okay? So there's no interface there, okay? And as you say, listen, if they're connected with 2-core cabling, and there's no earth as well too, so it's a pretty big issue, a pretty big safety issue, okay. And I suppose what we have the issue is that if we wanted to go changing lights in an old housing estate that doesn't have an interface, we have to get the ESB out. They have to pull their switch, or go into their mini pillar and pull a switch in there, but that's there. We can't go into their mini pillar. Okay, so on the project, we've kind of come up with solutions where we're going to put in an ESB cutout. I think that might be a Lucy Oxford box or something like that on there. So at least we can pull a fuse at the start and work away, and it'll be interfaced. Okay, so we'll come up with solutions that we don't have to do that. I suppose there's that, but then there's also the micro pillars. Okay, so there's an ESB mini pillar, but then there's the local authority micro pillar, which is the I suppose the correct way of doing it, which is just even a smaller pillar, and you can see the micro pillars, and we'll have our interface switch on that, and that'll local authority engineers then can come along, pull a switch or turn the isolator, and they can work on the public lights if they want to. Okay, and I suppose one of the main, as I say, aims of the project is to identify where all this 2-core cabling is, find out where all these direct fed columns are. So, are they directly fed off, they could be directly fed off buildings, and it could be directly fed off that. So this project is to kind of survey all that infrastructure. And this are, as I say, we're going to do condition rating of our asset, and these are kind of condition ratings from excellent, good to very poor of the boards on a public light. So you can kind of see there, you can go from excellent to very poor: unsafe wiring, no cutout or earthing, wire creep, shrinkage or poor bonding, untidy electrical wiring, do you know what I mean, good, and sound electrical integrity. So I'd say we're going around and opening up all them and varying, so we can see where all the problems are, and plan works for the next 5-10 years or long term to replace all these if needs be. I said we're not just serving the cutouts and stuff, or the doors. We're respecting the brackets and the columns and the foundations and protective coating and the interface and stuff like that. So we're collecting an awful lot of information on that. Going on to color temperature. The project, I suppose, initially we've decided, and I suppose this engagement with a number of kind of national bodies, we're going installing a warm color temperature nationally, okay, for the project. So that's up to 3,300 Kelvin, okay. I suppose historically over the last couple of years, the default color temperature being 4,000 Kelvin, which is a natural or neutral light, okay, it's moonlight, okay. But I suppose a lot of countries and across Europe and across the world, worldwide, are switching to the warmer temperatures. And we did one or two kind of test installs in one or two housing estates where we had one leg of it on a 4,000 Kelvin and another at the warm temperature, and that you would notice a difference there. You know, and it's a lot easier on the eye, even though the 4,000 is still a good light and it's still it's neutral. We decided to go for the warm color temperature. Now we're going to pay a small bit of penalty on energy efficiency. The colder the light, I suppose, the 4,000, 5,000, some of them we're going to 5,000, they're a lot more efficient. The 3,000, the warmer color temperatures are less efficient. Now there's only maybe 4 or 5% in it. But I think it will have a better project in the end up for it. We're also allowing for areas in dark skies, such as the national parks and bat conservation areas, go down to 2,700 Kelvin. We've been talking to the dark skies guys like in Mayo and Kerry and stuff like that. So we've accommodating them down to 2,700 Kelvin. We're also putting in dimming and trimming. Okay, so if you know what dimming and trimming, so yeah, you have your LED light in there, but you can dim the light at night, but also trim the hours. Okay, so it comes on later and goes off earlier. Okay, so we've put in kind of cities, 1,000 main roads. We will have at midnight it'll dim down 25%. Okay, of its lighting level to 6 a.m. Residential estates and rural residential settlements, we'll dim it down by 33% again at midnight to 6 a.m. And car parks, we're going a bit more aggressive with that, with 25% reduction at 9 p.m. So we're extending that as extended dimming hours. And park areas and pedestrian areas, we're going to dim about 50% at midnight until it comes on at 6 a.m. Again, listen, there's a lot more exotic and a lot more aggressive dimming and trimming profiles there that could be rolled out, and we're kind of future proofing our lights that can be reprogrammed to get those few extra percentages. And I think, listen, while we're putting up the lights and we get 55-60%, I think, do you know what I mean, but we could in future go into a lot more aggressive dimming and trimming profiles. You might notice some of the TII junctions, they're actually switching off their lights in the middle of the night. So, but listen, we have the technology that we can alter those as we go along. Map road public lighting. I suppose one of the key things, I'm nearly finishing up there now, guys, just in case you're worried. One of the key things was, back in the report 2012, was there was no national unified database of public lighting. So that was one of the big jobs we had, gathering them all together. So we've developed this national database of public lighting that has standardized field entries and standardized data to collect data and stuff like that. So that's one thing we've been developing over the past couple of years. We also developed a mobile app as well to collect the data, they can go out inside, condition rate, and collect all the information on it and stuff like that. So that's one thing we've been doing as well too over the last couple of years. So local authority engineers and give it to the contractors, so it'll automatically live updated to our national database, and then we can report on it nationally as well too, on metrics and stuff like that. Okay. And listen, this is one of the last slides here, and so as I said, it was a kind of a broad sweep on a few issues there, and I didn't even actually go near lighting design or any environmental issues and planning and stuff for that, or interlocal authority agreements, Section 85 agreements, and how that'll all work as well too. So listen, we could go on for another while, but listen, I said, listen, we've only kind of an hour or 45 minutes there. It's actually gone on longer than I thought it would. So yeah, so that's about it really. So so any questions?
Brian, how you doing? Listen, thank you very much for a very interesting lecture. Really interesting broad overview of what the project entails, from funding to business case to legacy cabling, health and safety, and everything in between. I think you've given us a real appreciation for what a major undertaking this is for the country, you know, affecting so many local authority areas, and I suppose it's one that affects all of us as we interact with urban areas, streets and roads, you know. So I think we might open it up then to some questions, and a reminder, folks, just to type in your questions into the Q&A section and not into the chat box, if you don't mind. So I think, Brian, there's a couple of questions in there already, so I'll just run through them briefly.
Yeah.
This is from Greg. Has any consideration been given to the possible adverse effects of new LED white lights that may have on various aspects such as sleep, mental health, nocturnal animals, wildlife, light pollution, astrology, etc.? New white lights are significantly brighter than old ones. I think you touched on some of that there towards the end.
Yeah, listen, listen. We've had active engagements with the Dark Skies guys. They came into us early on, wanting us to get more dimming trimming. And listen, we were initially going for 4,000 Kelvin, but we've gone down to warm now. So purely for that reason, you know, for light pollution and all this kind of stuff and mental health. And we did test beds. So yeah, so listen, we're down to warm light 3,300. It's up to 3,300 Kelvin. We're specifying warm because we didn't want to specify a particular color temperature, because lighting manufacturers might have a more efficient light at 3,100 Kelvin or 2,900. So we specified warm, which up to 3,300, but purely for the rate for that reason.
Yeah, and can I just ask you, is that warm? Is that noticeable? Like, is that actually like obviously we're moving away from the orange, like into the white area, but like how? Yeah,
it's noticeable, I suppose, if you're it's noticeable if you're standing next to two of them. Okay. You know, like if you had a 4,000 Kelvin light and one housing one there and a 3,000 there, you'd notice it. Like, do you know what I mean? But you would notice it standing. You would notice it, all right, but not too much. Like, do you know what I mean? You're talking minor thing there, but you would notice it, all right.
Okay, thanks. Anonymous question there: what kilowatt rating is a typical lamp post? With the change to LEDs, would this free up enough capacity to install slow electric vehicle charging points on lamp posts?
Yeah,
could be an opportunity to install both LEDs and charging points at the same time.
Yeah, I suppose, listen, we have a lot of the infrastructure, the underground, especially the underground infrastructure, is unknown. The condition of it. A lot of the cables are buried and not even inducting into the footpaths even, like, do you know what I mean? So, and as I say, a lot of the cables is two core concentric, you know, so we didn't really look at that. I wouldn't say the kilowatt rating, you know, I wouldn't say the square of the cable and what it can take. You know, it would be pretty low, to be honest. You know what I mean? As I say, you know, typically, you know, an LED light is running at whatever 20 odd watts or something like that. Like, do you know what I mean? So, listen, that's not saying that we can't do it in maybe a few of the urban areas that would have good infrastructure there. But you know, an awful lot of infrastructure out there is pretty poor, as you can see there from the polls there I had opened there. Like, you know, it's not great, really, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess having a full database of the asset after this is complete, it'll allow you sort of to plan where you can possibly add potential charging points, you know, into columns. Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Thanks. John O'Shea there is asking, is the public lighting data available publicly via web page, perhaps?
No, I suppose not yet. I suppose we are developing a public lighting database, a public lighting There's actually a domain name, publiclighting.ie, registered. Okay, it'll bounce you onto the RMO website. We're currently in development that it will have high-level metrics and stuff like that, of the project and FAQ and stuff like that. But I suppose we're kind of waiting that for the project rolls out live, if you know what I mean. So, but listen, if listen, what we have given information to a couple of kind of research projects that are kind of a couple of guys in Maynooth and Trinity have gone, like, if someone wants the inventory, we will try and send them on the inventory, like, do you know what I mean? But listen, contact the RMO or myself, do you know what I mean? We can talk to you directly.
Yeah, there was a question I had myself here, but Matthew was after beat me to it, but it was just in relation to the NEC. Obviously, it's, I suppose, less adversarial and balancing the risk. You know, I suppose Matthew was just asking, was there much pushback from the GCCC on switching to the NEC contract?
There wasn't really, actually. Do you know what I mean? I think they saw what we were trying to do and, like, the asset, if you know what I mean. And I don't think, like, I suppose it wasn't the National Maternity Hospital, like, do you know what I mean? It was, do you know what I mean? There's a set amount of lights, do you know what I mean? The risk wasn't all that great, and it was only literally where we've 90,000 lights or 85,000 lights, if you know what I mean. It was very open. I suppose with the NEC as well too, it's target cost. Okay, so you work to your target. Okay, so and you're agreeing your final budget as you go along. Okay, and you're agreeing you're forecasting your outturn as you go along as well too, on a monthly basis and a weekly basis. So you're not going to get caught in the end. So you can see if things are going out of control, you can de-scope them and stuff like that, like, so.
Okay, grand. Paddy is asking there, what's Brian's opinion of Airtricity's capability to service existing streetlights?
Listen, we're currently in tender. I'm not going to answer that.
Yeah, fair enough. Trimming and dimming, Gerard is asking, is the trimming and dimming capability of LEDs at the LED driver, or is it remote?
Yeah, well, I suppose there's various ways of doing it. You can have near field communications where you tap with your phone. We're putting in a specification where it can be programmed from the door, where you're going to have a 3 or 5 core cable coming down. Listen, we didn't go into CMS systems where it's connected through GSM and stuff like that, where you can do it on a live basis. But yeah, we can reprogram it easily.
Okay, another question here. They're flying in here, Brian. Another non-switch. How will the ESB manage the interfaces, and is there a management group set up to assist them?
Yeah, listen, I suppose we have a national group, I suppose, set up within the RMO, and a few representatives from Dublin City and a few of them. Like, so we're actively involved with the ESB networks on a daily basis. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
And the interface with them.
Okay, very good. Francis is asking, will all car parks be reduced 25% at 9 p.m. in the evening, or is it just selected ones, or how does that work?
Well, that's what's in the specification, I suppose. Like, do you know what I mean? So we've given it to local authorities as well too. They can specify areas that they don't want to dim. Okay.
Yeah.
Or they want to extra dim. So, like, if there's antisocial areas, we've given local authorities freedom to not dim there. Okay. And they can set the color temperature as well too in particular areas if they want.
Sure. John Owens is asking, would you have respaced the public lighting columns if you had to reinstall the network again? Like, would a wider spacing have suited LED lights, or is that a design question?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of a design question. It's actually, the problem is with LEDs that the light is very directional. Okay, the socks and sons, you get a lot of light spill. Okay, so you can get the light goes out further, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
If you have wider spacing LEDs, you have to have more power into them to go out further. That's one of the reasons why LEDs are very efficient, because they're only lighting the space you want to light. They're not lighting behind them in people's front gardens or back gardens and stuff like that, like, so.
Yeah, okay. I think Liam is asking something related. He's just asking about the wavelength of the light color. I suppose the spectral spread or frequency. Yeah, okay, that's probably
technical for me.
Very technical. Okay, no problem. Gerard Scott, can you comment on the spread and coverage of the lights? Are they lighting up to the rear as well, to the front and sides? And again, that's got to that light spill issue,
Yeah, no, listen, the local authorities, their public services to only light the motorway and the footpath, if you know what I mean. So you will probably, like, some people are complaining that their front garden or their front door is not as bright anymore, but that's the issue. That is the advantage of public lights. You only light the LED. Sorry, it's very directional light, if you know what I mean. And,
okay, yeah. Very good. Niall McMahon is asking, has there been any change to circuit protection to account for the lower power and also the much higher inrush of LED circuits. Has this affected the rules of interfacing with ESB?
Has been a chance of circuit protection? No, that hasn't kind of come up.
No.
It's a bit of a technical issue. I don't think so. I haven't heard that issue come up. No, to be honest.
No problem. Okay. John O'Gorman is asking, are LED lights maintenance free, or at least almost maintenance free? And
well, no, they're not. They're not maintenance free. I mean, you might have to clean the lenses every maybe couple of years or something. Not like, do you know what I mean? And checking them. I wouldn't say they're maintenance free. Like, but they are. Listen, they are rated for 100,000 hours and stuff like that. Like, you know.
Yeah. So probably a lot less troublesome, I suppose, than the legacy stuff.
Yeah. Listen, the socks and sunlight, you probably have to pay every 2 or 3 years. Kind of.
Yeah. Niall is asking, is there a plan to tackle urban areas first to help for earlier payback, or how is work being scheduled?
Listen, we're kind of leaving that up to the contractors to schedule it. You know, here's the south. Do you know what I mean? Knock yourself out. You know what I mean? But they'll be doing it. You know, they'll be doing it by municipal district. So they can municipal district from or municipal Tralee and stuff like that. So we want them to do go into municipal district and design it, retrofit it, and move on to the next one. If you know what I mean, they're not coming and going all over the place.
Sure. Derek is asking, is there a public lighting pole or standard replacement included in the tender? So I suppose, is there a standard?
Yeah, I would assume we have spec for pole replacements and stuff for that. Like, do you know what I mean? So we do.
No, that's fine. Anonymous, any lessons learned or issues in dealing with homeowners in residential areas as LED only light the carriageway and not the property's perception, less security possibly?
Listen, I think we got to, LEDs are good for the environment. I think that, we're doing our best, you know what I mean? So, obviously some people's front gardens are going to be lit up, but you're getting benefits for your environment, carbon reduction, and stuff like that. So listen, this is an issue, do you know what I mean? You can't keep all the people happy all the time, if you know what I mean. Sure, but, for the greater good,
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, another one here from John Kennedy. Can lights be dynamically dimmed based on traffic? I'm assuming not, but
well, it can actually. They can. Right. But you're talking CMS systems and stuff, and I've seen Philips have stuff where they have these add-on smart city stuff where cars come up and they switch on and switch off as they go past. But it costs a lot and stuff.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet.
Yeah. Is there any regulations on privacy regarding light shining into back gardens? Again, that's probably.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's not. Yeah, no problem. Again, I think it's regulations in shining into gardens. Again, street light, cul-de-sac behind the house, which comes on the back, shines in and illuminates back gardens. So again, I think it's all probably the same topic again.
Yeah, I suppose. Listen. The local authorities, the services for the public highway and the public footpath, if you know what I mean, where, it's like, we're not here for lighting up fields and back gardens and people's front gardens and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, okay. John is just asking, will the slides be available? So obviously the talk has been recorded, John, so you'll have access to those. Yeah. Sorry, one more there. Will the standard what stage? Sorry, I need to answer that one. Natalie's asking, what stage is Dublin City Council at? As they have most lights in their area? You were saying earlier on that they've kind of pushed on with some.
Yeah, they're pushed on. They're actually, I don't know what percentage they're at. I mean, we've been dealing with Dublin City, but they're doing a more asset upgrade project as well too. And they went over tender this year for they're replacing their underground cabling, 2 core cabling as they're going on. So they're spending a bit longer time at it, but they're actually spending more money, if you know what I mean. Along with it, so they're doing a different kind of project than ours.
Kieran is asking, will there be a standard wattage and mounting height on ESB network poles?
I wouldn't say there'll be standard wattage and mounting. I mean, it's basically on design. Do you know what I mean? So it's pole spacings and height as well too. It won't be standard. We're trying to keep the number of lights to a minimum. Obviously, we don't want every single light going on the road to be like a different wattage, if you know what I mean, or a different brand. You know what I mean? So I think there is in the contract. You know what I mean? We're trying to keep it some way consistent, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, okay. We've just the last few here. We'll let you go then, Brian. Yeah. Anthony's asking, how does the contract decide if an ESP pole needs to be replaced? Like, what's the criteria for?
Well, I suppose if an ESP pole is, we'll go out and we will check the ESP pole. I mean, it's down to ESP whether they replace it or not. Do you know what I mean? So it's an ESP asset, so they'll come out and they'll check it. We can highlight or flag to them this pole might need replacing. But in the end of the day, if it's an ESP pole, they replace it.
Okay, very good. Second last one here from Paul Mallon. He was just asking, will there be unique IDs assigned to each lighting column? Yeah, there
will
part
be,
of the asset management. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're putting a tag on as well too, kind of a new national ID number as well too.
Yeah. Okay. What is your strategy for a rollout of LED nationally?
Well, I suppose in this project in the southwest region, it's coming, as I said, went through it there. The east and then the other two regions will be tendering next year. I would imagine mid-year next year by the time they get up and running and over tender. So,
yeah.
Listen, the local authorities are ploughing on with it. The stock sites are going. So, listen, Wexford will be nearly 100% retrofit next year or two. Monaghan are nearly there as well too at the moment. Laois, all the local authorities have plans in place, really,
Yeah, and as you said, as you promised, then you'll be moving slightly from up the list there as well.
Yeah.
The last question there: will the UMR have data interfaces to the RMO for, I suppose, public lighting assets?
Yeah, we're currently in talks with the UMR, in negotiations with the UMR. So they're, I suppose, people in the know here. Obviously, this is a kind of a UMR thing. We'll be updating them. They're altering their system where they'll take a software file from us, CSV file or next file, that will automatically update their UMR, so we see the changes within the billing period. So they're doing a radical change there at the moment.
Okay, very good. Brian, listen, I think we'll leave the Q&A there. Thanks to everyone for their questions, and that concludes the Q&A.